Welcome back to the CBN News Channel. President Trump says the World Health Organization has 30 days to make, quote, major substantive improvements. Try saying that in English. If it wants to avoid the United States making the organization's funding freeze permanent. The president says that his administration has completed an investigation that shows the UN health body is responsible for making multiple failures in the early stages of the coronavirus outbreak. Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, Hudson Institute senior fellow Robert Spalding explains how the actions of both the WHO and China actually created a global pandemic.
What the WHO talked about in mid-January was what they call potentially minor human-to-human transmission. Of course, we know that the Chinese Communist Party knew that there was human-to-human transmission, and in fact, the WHO was aware of this, but nevertheless continued to tell the world that there was no danger from the coronavirus spreading. And this is at the same time that the Chinese Communist Party was encouraging travel outside of Wuhan to international destinations, but not domestic destinations. So essentially, the Chinese Communist Party caused the pandemic, and because the World Health Organization didn't do their job, actually they were acting at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party. They actually aided and abetted the spread of the disease.
Well, how is it that China has so much influence on the WHO when the United States contributes nearly $900 million in recent years it has to China, and China about 10 times less that, only about 83 million. So why so much influence from China?
Well, because the Chinese Communist Party actually does something called elite capture, and it's really about finding those individuals that have an ability to make decisions that benefit them and encouraging them, creating relationships with them, many times, oftentimes financial, that allows them to gain some kind of profit or benefit, and the Chinese Communist Party get their allegiance with regard to the decisions they make. Now, we don't have direct evidence of this with regard to Tedros, but we do know he comes from Somalia. Of course, Somalia has gotten billions of dollars from the Chinese Communist Party. So inevitably, the World Health Organization, although it gets 10 times the amount from the United States, the leaders of the World Health Organization are certainly suspect.
How should the world respond, General?
Well, what we were doing prior to coronavirus was slowly decoupling the two economies. The Chinese Communist Party doesn't believe in free trade. They don't believe in civil liberties. And so we were trying to protect the American businessmen from the uncompetitive behavior of the Chinese Communist Party and their companies. That being said, the coronavirus really demonstrates how dangerous that's been, in terms of PPE, masks, active ingredients for pharmaceuticals, antibiotics. So what's going to happen is we need to accelerate that decoupling and really begin to work together as democracies to reflow our trading relationships, reflow our financial relationships. And as we do, we'll be able to protect the societies and the companies from the predations of the Chinese Communist Party.
And finally, I've got to ask you about China's actions around the globe, as many countries are still trying to save lives during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our Asia correspondent, Lucille Toulousan, recently reported about the Chinese Navy threatening Vietnam and Indonesia in the South China Sea. That comes at a time when the Chinese Communist Party is losing support around the world because of COVID-19. Its military is acting aggressively, even with close flyovers of U.S. ships in the region. I'm assuming you think that's not really a way to win friends and influence people, is it? How should we respond?
Well, the Chinese Communist Party built these 4 illegal islands in international waters. The International Tribunal in The Hague basically ruled against them. They've ignored it. Their goal is basically to steal the resources of the countries in the region from their exclusive economic zones. $5 trillion in trade flows through those waterways. And the United States Navy is there to protect the international waters. I think we're going to have to stand up collectively as democracies against this aggression. I don't think that's going to lead to conflict, but we have to stand our ground, and we can't let the Chinese just roll over and take international space away from the global commons.
Okay, I'm sure more to come. Brigadier General Robert Spalding, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute. Always appreciate your insight, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
As always, you can watch more of the Global Lane tonight at 9:30 Eastern right here on the CBN News Channel.